Family, welcome to this. If you're looking for the CNZ webinar about the new grants programs that will be replacing arts grants from next year, you are in the right place. Kia ora and welcome. To begin, I'd just like to hand over to Kiriama. Maui tūwhiri te hui e hoa?
Ai, tēnā koe, tēnā rā o te kōrua. O tērā, tēnā tātou kua tae mai. Kia kotahi atu ki te kaupapa, ki te karakia, kia whakarewa ake ai tō tātou hui. Nō reira, kei noi tātou. Tui a rangi nui e tui honei, tui a papa tuanuku takoto ake nei. Tui a te here tangata i take a mai, Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmama. Tui a te muka tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. I te kōrero rero i te wānanga, pua takataka, pua whiowhio. Ka haunuku te marama, ka haurangi te marama. Ka takoto te hau o tū te winiwini, o tū te wanawana. O tū whakaputu atu ki te whaiao ki te marama. Tūturua whiti whakamaua ki a tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora e hoa. So thank you everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Debs McSmith. I'm ordinarily the manager of our investment services team here at Creative New Zealand. Today I'm living my best Carol Hirschfeld life and standing in as MC, host, interviewer extraordinaire. On the webinar today we have Gretchen LaRoche, who's our Senior Manager for Arts Development Services, Kiriama Te'ua and Paul Lisi, who are both in our Arts Practice Director team. We are here to share with you some information about new approaches to funding that we're taking from next year. How this webinar will run is that Gretchen and I will have a little chit chat. Then the team will talk through the specifics to each of the programs. We'll have time for a few Q&As at the end. If we don't get through all the questions, we'll be taking note of all of them and we will post responses on our website. It is a webinar, so don't worry, we cannot see or hear you. So lie back, get comfy, take pants off if you want. But I will say that we are being recorded for posterity and for future sharing of this info. Throughout the hui, you can submit questions through the Q&A function, and we will try to get through some of them at the end of the kōrero. Ka pai? So, Gretchen, what the deuce are we doing here?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you posed it because it's a nice open one to talk to. So kia ora and thanks, Debs, and kia ora koutou to everyone that's joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out. So why are we here? Well, I think looking back 12 months ago, I think, you know, it was really the point where the voices had coalesced that for many arts grants were no longer working for them. And there are lots of reasons for that, both around the process, assessment, decision-making. People felt sort of thrown together in one funnel and not perhaps recognised well in terms of the different practices. They were finding the programs a bit inflexible, but also, and not to mention, the application cap as well. So
too soon.
yeah, sorry. So I think we'd reached this point where, look, we knew that for many people, it was no longer serving the sector well, and it wasn't really fit for purpose any longer. So it's time to have a look at this. But we wanted to take a different approach to reviewing these programs and thinking about how we could do this differently. And so we actually embarked, and we felt it was really important that through all of this work, the voice from the sector was present, was front and centre. So we went out on the road from the beginning of this year. Gosh, it seems so long. Yeah, that was a great roadie. And we actually had 24 workshops, one all around the country, live and online, and that was really to hear from people what their aspirations were, what do they want to see, and boy did we hear, and we listened, and we came back at the end of that, the wealth of information and knowledge, which we reflected back in a report, pretty honest one, and from that some pretty key themes emerged, which we then developed and brought forward into working bees, so multi-day working bees, where people came in from the sector with CNZ staff working together on those key themes to actually build what we now will be sharing today as these new programs. We've had lots of input from different groups along the way with those as well. So there's been many voices, and hopefully for those of you that did contribute to either the workshops, the working bees, the written feedback, the discussions, hopefully you might hear your voices or see your voices reflected in these programs. I'd like to acknowledge everybody that did contribute. It was a big process, both externally across the sector, internally in CNZ, but I feel really, really proud of what's been achieved, and hopefully for you out there, actually, that this will also mean that we've heard what you've said to us, and that actually things are going to be a little bit easier for you. So we really considered all of the input we received super carefully. I think it's fair to say, though, we can't meet everyone's expectations, and I do want to acknowledge that. But every piece of feedback, every contribution we had has been really listened to and thought about carefully.
Awesome. It's good to be reminded of that long journey that you've been on, lest we wonder that this all maybe came out of a crazy post-fondue party cheese dream. So what's behind all of it? Like, what are we trying to achieve with these changes?
Yeah, I think there are some definite key things that we realised were really important that we tried to encapsulate in the new programs and the new way of working. So this actually is a bigger shift for us than just the funding programs themselves. So in part of this is also an intentional way of working more closely with the sector, of actually supporting artists in ways beyond funding as well, that might be connecting people, career advice where we can, sharing information about other opportunities out there beyond just what CNZ can offer. But some of the principles of shift as well are from moving really that focus from project funding or a particular activity into thinking about how we can support people and time for artists to do the work, to think about the work, to take those artistic risks. We're also really interested in these programs of looking at how we can consider and make decisions based on the benefits and the impact that the work or your contribution might make. And that's a really important shift and change as well. So we're not just looking at the number of workshops or the number of people that might be participating, but what difference does it make? And that becomes really critical, because over time, if we're looking at that, this is the best way that we can make really strong evidence-based argument for the value that the arts contributes to this country, and also the argument for ongoing and increased investment. So that's a really key part of that. So we've had this in mind. How do we grow the pie? Well, this is how we're going to contribute to that conversation through this process of grants. We're also wanting to support artistic risk-taking as well. We heard loud and clear that people noted that with the old arts grants too, we placed a real premium on having a pretty clear idea of the outcome. And we know that sometimes when you're exploring a new direction in your practice, you don't always know what's going to happen at the end of it. But actually, that evolution of practice, that evolution in your work, is really critical to keeping our art and our art forms, our practice alive. So we really wanted to think about that. Also, another point is the flexibility of how the funding's applied. You know best how to use that. So we're moving to a bit more of a model of trust. You hold the knowledge in that. So rather than everything itemized into specifically how you're applying that money, we're looking at the impact that that's going to be delivering. And can you do it? Do you have a good plan? And then we will support that. And also in some instances, this is another key change, looking at some longer term support through some of the programs as well. We know that if we don't always have the money, actually what is really critical to people being really able to fulfill and pursue that vision is actually greater certainty, so that they're not just having to leap from short term to short term of the project funding. So those are some of the key changes that we're talking about there, that's come from the cheese dream. So.
I mean, it sounds good. I mean, it sounds like it's definitely more than just a rebrand. or a repackage. What's it actually going to be, what's actually going to be different? How will things feel differently for our community?
Yeah, well, look, we really do hope that things will feel quite differently for people that are engaging with CNZ in multiple different ways. So from that point of view, if you are thinking about applying for one of these programs, but if you are thinking that you'd like to go, the fact that actually we'll be very clear on who you can talk to. So named people all across the website, more people that actually you can speak to and support, different ways of submitting your application, a simpler application process, fewer questions. In some instances, you won't need to submit a budget and you can utilise some of your own perhaps documents that you might already have. You can do some audio recordings as well. And for those people that would also like some assistance in their application, we'll be there to do that as well. The assessment area is also changing. We heard loud and clear on the road that actually from those people that have been working as assessors, they really wanted to have that opportunity to look at all of the applications and their funding round, not just a sample. So where practical, we'll be doing that in art form panels, but also a strong call for CNZ to have an involvement in some of the decision making as well, and some accountability for the decision making. So we'll be looking in some instances at the strategic impact part and the budget, and then utilising the expert peer assessors for the art form and the thinking side of it. And then we'll come together in the room to make the decision together against a notional budget. I've mentioned the relational way of working as well, and that's really key. So not only are we encouraging people to get in touch and speak with us, ask advice about that application, but we'll also be out on the road more and publishing where we're going. We'll be assigning regional responsibilities as well, so that you know somebody that's going to be becoming familiar with your area and where you're placed, and also looking to convene the regional sector too. And probably just one of the other things I'd mention as well that we really hope is noted as a change for people that have accessibility requirements, for deaf and disabled artists as well. There's the ability to have some additional funding added onto your grant to meet some of those costs that you have to face that perhaps others don't. So that's also there as well. So another significant change.
Amazing.
So I think actually probably if I can get a slide up, because I can just quickly cover off the principal changes, and you're quite right, Debs, that was a lot of words to actually just say probably what's on the slide might actually work better. So I'm just hoping there that we've got the slide going up of the shifts that you'll see. Here we go. And probably I could have said this just by showing the slide, but so I always like an excuse to have a bit of a kōrero. So in those principal shifts, hopefully that you can see in the slide, but I'll talk through them. It just summarises that moving from primarily funding projects or activity into primarily investing in people and time. So we're wanting to value the creation of things. We're moving from that creation of things into valuing the time of the artist. Moving from currently, we spend a lot of time in assessing applications around your capability or capacity to deliver the activity, to actually moving into really putting the emphasis on the strength of artistic vision and purpose. Moving from supporting projected outputs into supporting the projected impacts of activity. And that also means we're moving from short-term funding life cycles into focusing where we can on longer-term development. We know that our current project model tends to mean that you have to break things down into little chunks. And we know that that's not the way it works out there in the sector. So we want to give you that ability to think longer term, because I know you're doing that already. We just want to facilitate that. And then finally, too, moving from that support, which is really focused on a series of interactions conditional on Creative New Zealand support, into having a relationship with artists that doesn't just rely on the CNZ support, but more generally, we want to hear what's going on for you and for you out there. So that's just a summary of all the stuff I said beautifully pulled together in one slide.
Those are some pretty big shifts. It sounds amazing. Shall we take a look at how the actual programs are going to shape up? Kiri, I think I hand over to you, my friend, to start us off.
Tēnā tātou. Wow, geez, just to whakatapere taku kōrero kia rāua. Earlier this year, we held a series of workshops around the country, 24, including 6 other working bees. And of course the other hui that we run across various kaupapa as well. And the key messages came across really strong, that the current contestable funding isn't fair. It doesn't work for everybody. That we have individual artists in a contestable funding round almost competing against festivals, or individual artists or emerging artists competing against well-established organisations for the same puna or the same pool of funding. And so what came through really strong is that our sector wanted a system that worked better for them, that was fairer, that created more opportunities for connection, that the process of application writing was laborious. And if our success rate is only around 30%, then that means that 70% of people will walk away really feeling like they weren't respected or their work wasn't being acknowledged. And they've just wasted all of that time as well. So we've looked at really lightening up the workload within the application process itself. The other thing that we're really making a really big shift to is the relationships between ourselves, our partners, and especially our relationship with the sector, and helping to nurture those relationships within the sector themselves. So you'll see up on the screen here, we've got 3 main funnels: artists at an early stage of their career practice, artists. Another funnel is artists and collaboratives, and the third one we have here is arts organisations and groups. And I'll start off to talk a little bit about the artists, the early stage. The artists at the early stage, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues. So really, this was born out of Toitipu Toere, which was a program that was run in the Ngātoi Māori funding pool. It came out of a lot of research that was done back in a roadshow that happened back in 2017, which asked for more opportunities for emerging artists, a fairer scale, a fairer way of working with our sector. And so Toitipu Toirea was developed back in 2017, then redeveloped only last year to make sure that we met the needs of our emerging artists. So there'll be some definite changes that you'll see within this program. And I think this is one of the changes as well, is that originally this only sat in the Ngātoi Māori pool. Because we really understand the value of tuakana teina. And I think Aotearoa is at that same place where we all understand and value what that means to work with the tohunga and the shifting roles of tuakana teina. So within the artists at the early stage of their career fund, you'll have more time to develop your practice and create work. There'll be opportunities for you to develop international relationships or work internationally. Sharing work with others, working with a tohunga, working with a mentor is one of the keys to success for our young people. And this is what we hear every day, not just our workshops that we've been conducting across the country, but in our everyday work. And also the chance to be able to develop strong business practice and develop relationships outside or with your own community. So of course we'll be giving a little bit more information about what that means for everybody, but for now that's I guess it's the high level, and I'm handing over to Paul, I think.
Thanks, Ehoa. So as Gretchen had mentioned earlier, one of the funds that we're looking at opening next year will be called the Creative Fellowship Fund, which is really focusing on fostering risk-taking and artistic exploration, particularly around addressing time and space for artists to explore, to encourage the evolution of an art form and their practice. And we're also hoping that this is flexible enough to apply to people that you're collaborating with as well. So just a few more details around that you'll see up on the slide, but also just conscious that this information is also available on our website. So if you're just here listening in, please don't worry. There'll be many forms of this information that you'll be able to kind of get a lot more clarity on. So this one in particular, I guess kind of really key points is that there'll be 2 rounds next year, and that there are 2 fixed amounts that you can apply for. So that's either 25K for 6 months or 50K for 12 months. And as was mentioned earlier as well, there's no budget required if you are applying for this one. And also, you know, if you're applying for up to 25K, you'll just have to describe what you want to do, what you've been doing recently within that space, and how that contributes to what you want to do now, as well as the importance of it, why you think this will benefit your practice at this point in time. So that's for 25K. If you're thinking of going for the bigger amount, which is 50K over a longer period of time, we're really interested to hear how you'll share this learning and the discoveries that you have as part of this process, and also how this might evolve your practice or your art form, and how that helps within the wider community as well. As was mentioned earlier, the decision-making process is also slightly changed, where the decision-making process is actually done within those art form panels, and there will be kind of Creative New Zealand staff as part of that process too. And also just noting that there'll still be 3 of those main funding pools, which is the General Arts funding, Ngātoi Māori funding, and Pacific Arts funding. And for Ngātoi and Pacific Arts, there will be Pacific and Māori staff involved in all of those stages as well. The next one, which is very much linked into this, is the Creative Impact Fund. I know that impact is very much a word that a lot of us are now wanting to ensure that our work can measure the impact that it's having on our people and on our community. And we see this as going hand in hand with the Creative Fellowship Fund as well. So just to the detail for this one in particular, this is really to support artists, practitioners and collaboratives to develop work that enriches audiences and the communities. And if you're playing along at home, this is very much probably the most similar to art grants, just so that you can get the framing around that. But the difference is that it could be for a longer period of time, as well as there's more emphasis on who you're sharing with and the communities that you're working with. So again, looking at that impact piece, and the maximum amount an artist or a practitioner or collaborative can receive in a 12-month period across this fund in particular, and the previous fund that I've just been talking about, is $125,000. Again, please, these numbers and all of this stuff will be available online, so don't worry if we're slightly going a bit too fast, I apologize. And also recognizing that this is a lot of information as well. So that's, as you can see up on the screen in front of you, you know, we're looking at activities that include creation of works or distribution of work, as well as looking at audience engagement and raising that awareness. And we're also really interested in research and advocacy. So for this fund in particular, you can apply for up to $50,000, and there is enough room if you can prove that that you can apply for up to 125 if you can show revenue from other sources as well. In terms of what this application might look like, you know, we want to know what you want to do. Again, what you've been doing that has informed that this is what you want to do now. Also, one of the key changes is the needs that you've identified for your communities and how you meet those needs as well. This is also one of the funds that we're looking at that will need a detailed budget. as well. So again, this information is up online, but yeah, this will require a budget as part of that application process. And similarly to the fund before, the decisions will be made by those panels and as well as Creative New Zealand staff. So the decisions will be made in those sections there. I think, and I've got one more, apparently. I've got one more slide to go. And this last one that I'll be talking about, sorry, is the Development Fund for Artists and Practitioners. And I think from at face value, this is very similar to the Building Business Capability Fund that we had put up a few years ago. And we had heard from many people that how much that they enjoyed this program in particular. So we've kept it and kind of extended it a bit further to include not just building business capability, but also artistic capability, which was not one of the things that we could have funded under the BBC. I'm going to get that wrong, that fund. So kind of a few high level things for this fund in particular. There will only be one round per year. And so again, it's looking at things like research, training, coaching or mentoring, or associated costs to attend workshops or conferences or wānanga o Taranua up in another country or internationally. In terms of the money that's available, you can apply for up to $8,000. And this also includes CapEx or capital expenditure. So again, for those of you playing at home, there was a bit of a limit that we had previously for the BBC IP. However, we recognise that CapEx is a cost that is part of practice and is also part of developing your practice as well. So going through what you might need for an application, it's what you want to do, the importance of the timeliness as to why you want to do this training or this coaching or mentoring at this point, what you think the benefits are for your practice and the wider community that you are part of, whether that's a community of practice or kind of ethnic communities that you're a part of, and also what you hope this might lead to. One of the key things as well around the budget is that you don't need to supply a budget to apply. That stuff will be handled if you are successful based on your idea. So again, if you want to make note of that. This is all available online as well. And obviously more detail will be made available next year just before those funds open. But again, this is more of a signal. Hey, look, these are the things that we're wanting to look after and support as well. And just that last point at the bottom there around how decisions will be made, again, made by the panel of peer assessors as well as CNZ staff, still with those three main funding pools. Kia ora. Back to you with the studio.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. And I think that's over to me now to talk about the next program, the New Leaders Program. So this is something that was developed very much in response to what we're hearing out on the road. And what we heard repeatedly was that for people that were either new in a role in an organisation, or we're actually leading work, or we're taking on significant roles of responsibility as individuals working within their community, that actually, there's that moment you step into that sort of role or you get designated that responsibility. It's like suddenly everyone expects you know everything. And I'm sure there are many people out there that have had this experience, and suddenly you're going, I can't believe everyone's given me the keys to this and they think I know it all. And suddenly, there are just things that you can't really be prepared for. And it's things like, what sort of relationship can you reasonably expect from your board? And how should you be responding to your board and, dare I say it, managing your board? And then there's things like, HR, because if you are that community leader or you're working in that a small group or organisation, these things often fall to one person, and it can be lonely and it can be tough. And suddenly you're responsible for the HR matters, for compliance reporting. Maybe you've come from a different background or practice, and actually, you know, you're really wanting to get your head across reading balance sheets, movement of equity, all of those sorts of things. So this program has been born out of a response for that, both from I suppose, a skill development, but actually even more importantly, about forming a cohort of people that can support each other around the country. We know that, and we certainly heard loud and clear, that for particularly for many people that are based in smaller centres, smaller towns around the country, that actually the burden of expectation on them is very high. And so we both risk those people burning out, but also how we develop into that space, especially if you're coming from art form practice, maybe you're stepping into these sorts of roles. So anyway, we've put together the new leaders program, and you might be in a role for the first time or thinking about it. We'll open this every second year. It will be a year-long program that will run with online events over the course of the year, as well as an in-person, that will look at different modules of support, but also taking feedback from the cohort of what they'd like to be looking at. There'll be involvement of both CNZ staff leading some of the focus points, but also external presenters as well. So there'll be a call for interest on this and a selection process that'll be with external people looking across this, as well as some CNZ people, and we'll be asking you really to comment on what you're hoping to gain from the opportunity of participating in it, and what are the gaps that you might have identified in your knowledge that you're wanting to develop. And so for those people that progress through into the next stage, we'll then just be having an interview with them and getting some support from your community to say, this is someone we really want to invest in because they're doing amazing work and we want to see them absolutely fly. So there's no funding, a grant per se associated with this program, but all the costs will be covered in your participation, and all the work that's covered through that. So that's our new leaders program there. So moving on into that space of the arts organisation and groups, and I should say that we are taking a pretty open interpretation of what's an arts organisation, what's a group, you know, who are the people that qualify for this program. You don't have to be a legal entity, you don't have to be formally structured. We're really looking at groups of people here that have a particular ongoing vision and purpose that might continue even if there are personnel changes in that time. It might be a very small group, or it might be quite an established with quite a big infrastructure. All welcome into this program for arts organisation and groups. And so what we'll hear is that this is more around supporting a program of work based upon that vision that you have and being able to demonstrate the impact or the benefits that you're bringing into your community, whether that's a community of art form, of practice, of place, of ethnicity. So a very broad interpretation of those benefits or impacts, that interaction you're having with your community. But what we're looking here to do is support that broader program of activity. So moving out from the specific projects into that broader work, and with the opportunity to be supported for up to a year, or up to 12 months, or in some cases where we can, up to 2 years and up to 24 months. There's two different funding levels available in this. So you can come in for up to $50,000 for either 1 or 2 years, and the application process is a little more straightforward. Or you can come and apply for over $50,000 and up to $25,000 per year for up to 2 years. And we'll just have a few more questions there that we'll ask you to speak to, including detailed budget, that you've got support coming from beyond Creative New Zealand funding. Generally, we won't support over more than 50% of your annual revenue based on previous years' sort of turnover or revenue. We will ask for a manifesto, if you like, or a vision statement, might be a strategic plan, but if you don't have a strategic plan, that's okay. But we do want to understand what you're achieving with your organisation. So that's the distinction between the up to 50 or the over 50. The over 50, a little bit more information required in that application, and other forms of support as well. But I think what we're really wanting to signal here is the important place that groups, organisations, collectives hold in their community, that they're often more than the sum of their parts, if you like. They're really critical pieces of infrastructure that actually uphold many other people around them. They're like a piece of the ecosystem, or the coral reef that many others are supported by and through and interact with. And so we want to support those organisations that are doing a great job of sharing their resources with others as well, so that we can really maximise that benefit. Now, I am just going to actually speak to the elephant in the room, that for some people that have been in the annual arts grant space, they've been able to apply for up to $150,000 a year. Look, that's absolutely true. And there's a couple of reasons why we've had to just reduce that top amount. Obviously, the financial context that we're moving into, less available. That's true. And the average grant that we've been making has really shot up over recent years, of course, because the demand and the need is there. But we've got to be realistic about you supporting people and being realistic about the level that we can support people at in a sustainable way. However, we have tried to offset that by greater flexibility. This funding can be used for artistic or operational costs. This is effectively core funding, if you want to think of it that way. You can apply it where you see fit, and it means you can be flexible with it. We know that when organisations and groups apply, you've got often many other stakeholders in there. Could be cash, could be in kind, but those things aren't always confirmed. You don't always know absolutely when you put that application in. So we want you to have the flexibility to utilise that funding in the best possible way as you see fit, because you know your business best. So there is that greater flexibility offered, and also importantly, the longer term support as well. So I know that this may be something that is disappointing to hear for some, but we do hope that actually some of these other adjustments provide some other benefits, not to offset the reduction in the top level of funding for some, but actually to offer hopefully other opportunity there as well. So there will be more information, of course, up on the website where you can delve into the things of what you'll be asked for, also how the decisions will be made. The fund will be available twice a year. Again, we're reducing the number of times we're opening this because we really do want to be encouraging that longer term thinking, longer term planning as well. We want to give you certainty. We don't want to be tying you up and having to do lots of applications all the time. So that's a little bit about the organisations and Groups Fund.
Kia ora.
Now,
Back to Kiri ana.
yeah.
Ka pai, tēnā tātou. So the next fund I'm going to talk about is the Development Fund for Arts Organisations and Groups. So this is a little bit like the BB, the building business, the word that Paul was having trouble with. However, this is more for arts organisations and groups, and this is the first time that we've been able to offer a dedicated fund towards the capability building of your arts organisation. So this round will open in 2024. And it opens after July 2024 with activities starting from October in 2024. The top amount that you can apply for is $20,000 towards the capability building initiatives for your arts organisation or group. And some of the key areas or priority areas that you may want to consider are things like cultural competency or responsiveness to te tiriti or waitangi, accessibility or planning or policy training, research and evaluation, governance development, audience engagement, financial resilience, of course, environmental responsiveness. So I'm really excited about this fund. This is a need that I'm constantly hearing as I'm out on the road or out working with some of our arts organisations, and it's really good to see that it has its own dedicated fund, and that our arts organisations are able to apply for this, and it's not going to be in competition with amazing festivals or big shows or other things. I guess sometimes that could may be prioritized later down the track because of the nature of the current funding system that we have. So what you should include in your application is a description of what you want to do, your plan to implement the outcomes of your initiative, and the benefits to your arts organization or group or your communities. We'll also be asking for a budget. Now, Creative New Zealand, of course, the way that the decisions will be made, Creative New Zealand staff will assess parts of the application, and we'll be taking advice from experts and other mātanga when required. So again, if there's any more questions, feel free to reach out. All the information will be on our website, and of course all of our team are waiting on standby to answer any questions in the background, so feel free to drop them into the chat there as well. Moving on to the next slide. Residencies, Internships and Fellowships Fund. Great. So this fund is aimed at providers to offer residencies, fellowships or internships for New Zealand artists and practitioners for up to 3 years. Now this fund will only be open once every 3 years. One funding round will open in 2024, opens after August for activities starting in November 2024. You can apply for costs towards delivering a residency, fellowships or internships for up to 3 years. The amount of funding available is to be advised. So we're still working through some of the clicks and pops there. But some things you can expect to apply for are things like artist stipend and wage, travel, accommodation and materials. So what you might want to think about including into your application, and of course this will be clearer as we get a little bit more down the road. Who are you, and what the plan is for the residency, the internship or the fellowship, your relationship with mana whenua or the communities or where relevant, how you ensure the residency or internship or fellowship is accessible, how you will support the recipient, manaakitanga of course, and of course showing us a budget, showing your in-kind or financial contribution. A panel of assessors will assess the applications and make the decisions for this particular fund. Another exciting new development. So handing on. Moving to the next slide. Ka pai. Nā mai
I can speak
tēnei.
to this one. So as we've all said several times over, you can go to our website to learn more about this. This was intended to be an information sharing exercise, and there's been a lot of information shared. So our website has been updated. There are videos about each fund, and then we do have more webinars and Q&A sessions scheduled. So here's the schedule of the Q&A sessions. And then I think we have a webinar like this tomorrow night that has New Zealand Sign Language support. And specific webinars from Ngā Toi Māori and Pacific Huts as well. Cool. So, waiting anxiously to see what questions come through from the team backstage. The first one that's come through is, does the project have to make a difference or impact on communities only in New Zealand, or can it have international significance?
I'm happy to answer that one.
Please do.
I'll jump in on that. I think if it was solely going to benefit the international community, then no, it's probably not going to be a high priority for New Zealand, for Creative New Zealand, sorry, to support. However, if you're talking about a project occurring in the international space, but it involves New Zealand artists, or it's a piece that's returning, or it's employing New Zealand artists, practitioners, or it's promoting the work of New Zealand, where it's going to open up opportunities, then that's something different. We're certainly not saying that we're only interested in supporting things within New Zealand at all. These funds are all designed to support activity that's taking place in the international space. But again, we look at what benefits will be returned to New Zealand or New Zealand artists. So if there are New Zealand artists and practitioners involved, that's a clear benefit into our arts sector.
Kia ora. Pātai tuarua. Is there any kōrero around how the $5 million less funding to CNZ, as mentioned in the CE's newsletters, will impact the amount of funding on offer for artists in 2024 and beyond? Yep. Smiley face, that's nice.
Should I take this one too?
Please.
Yeah. What I would say is that actually from the outset, right at the very beginning, when we went out on the road with the initial workshops in Mananga around the country, we were very conscious that we knew that we would be returning to pre-COVID funding levels. So these programs have actually been designed from the get-go with that space of the pre-COVID funding, so without the additional top-ups that we've been receiving from COVID recovery money. However, I think it is very, very clear and evident that we all believe that it would be, we'd like to see more funds available, and that actually what we do as a sector, what artists are delivering, is really extraordinary, and it needs that investment. So at the beginning of this webinar, I spoke about this shift through these contestable grants of capturing more impact and longitudinal impact as well. These are things that historically we have not really focused on or captured through the old arts grants model. And so it really is our belief that by doing this, we actually get much stronger evidence-based arguments for the change, for the benefit, for the difference that investment will make in the arts through this work, through these programs, through your hard work. And we can use that then to make far more effective and very focused arguments when we're looking at budget bids, but also opening up conversations with other potential partners to increase the funding pie as well. So it's a bit of a two-parter in that response around, yes, they've been designed knowing we'd go to pre-COVID levels, but actually we don't just want to sit and stop there. We want to take the opportunity to think about how we can grow that pie in the time ahead.
Kia ora. Gretchen, you talked earlier about, or you mentioned having CNZ staff would sort of have particular focus on particular regions around the motu. This person asked, kia ora, if you're talking about taking a regional view, will that extend to ensuring a more equitable distribution of funding? Te Waipounamu. Also a smiley face. Thank you for all being so kind.
Oh, kia ora, my friends down in Te Waipounamu. Yeah, look, as it stands right now, that is something that actually gets discussed and looked at through the grants, through the arts grants process, is actually that distribution regionally. However, I think there is a growing consciousness that demographics have changed, including population shifts and growth and change, and we need to make sure we're meeting that. But also that opens up the point too, which is something I forgot to mention earlier, which is the what comes next. And that is to say that we're not just stopping here. And there was another very significant piece that was raised when we're out on the road, and that was around self-determination. and how communities can have greater self-determination and greater involvement in those decision makings of their own arts journey priorities. And that's something that we're going to continue to be working on. That's not something that has been ignored or fallen off the list. Actually, we deem this to be such a significant piece of work that we want to look at this. And that in particular has quite considerable impact and implications for people sitting regionally and in areas that actually feel that they have been traditionally under-supported or overlooked. So that's very much on the ticket for the next bit. We thought we'd get this. This was a pressing thing to get done. And then we continue on.
Kia ora. So from regions back overseas, there's a lot of interest around sort of where international activity sits amongst all of these new funds.
Perhaps I throw to my colleagues, if Paul or Kiriama or either of you like to leap in on this one.
Over to you, Kiri.
Oh my gosh, my mouth sensitivity is set at 100%. So I was in my settings trying to fix that, and I actually missed that question. Apologies. I think I've got it. No, it's still playing up. I just need to fix that. What was the question? Sorry.
Where does international activity sit amongst all of these new funds?
Great. So you know, there's a couple of funds that you can apply to. We spoke earlier about the fund, the development fund for artists. We spoke also about the emerging artists fund. So you have a couple of options there, whether it's international travel or even bringing other expertise in from other countries, as long as it benefits New Zealand arts or the practitioners here. That's absolutely eligible within the two funds that we spoke about earlier. I think, Paul, you covered that off earlier, didn't you?
I might just jump in and add a little bit to that as well. And just to say that we continue with the dedicated international focus and people working in that space that will be doing specific work in the international and specific partnership building and initiatives and opportunities. But all international activity as well that you might be interested in undertaking, you know, it can be supported through these funds. So it is intended that actually it covers off international work. So you've heard about the early career artists, the development funds. You might be wanting to undertake some artistic, creative development that's actually happening internationally. That can be supported through that fund. The Creative Fellowship Fund, well, actually, you may wish to undertake that in an international space, or that research or exploration or development of work might have an international component as well in that. The Creative Impact Fund of delivering, again, it might be part of your program where you're developing a piece of work, a new work, body of work, perhaps presenting it in New Zealand, but actually longer term looking to present that internationally as well. We're interested in those plans. And for groups and organisations, again, we're encouraging you to think if working in that international space or collaborating with artists internationally is important for you and your work, you incorporate that into that program. Again, this is moving away from us being really specific about this piece here must fit here and here. We're really encouraging people to think about that sort of longer term, that full development of program. So if the international aspect is important to you, it's supported in your program of work. Yeah.
Kia ora. And then the last question that we'll cover today is nice and easy. Who will be delivering this new leadership program, please?
Oh, well, the Arts Development Services team, supported by the rest of Creative New Zealand. Is that the sort of, was the intent of the question asking how?
That's all I have.
Yeah. So certainly, so we've got all the people that you can see on your screen will be heavily involved in getting this out. So it continues to be delivered through the Arts Development Services team. And that is the three funds, as again we spoke of: General Arts, Ngā Toi Māori, and Pacific Arts. So for the time being, all delivered through the Arts Development Services.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I guess, as well, around what that might look like, you know, we're very, very much keen to co-develop what that would look like for that cohort as well. So I think looking at the general arts, Ngātauri Māori and Pacific, under those funding pools, it'll be very much collaborative process led by the wider arts development services team within Creative New Zealand. And kind of linked into another question around, you know, there are other places that also deliver something similarly. Yes, we are absolutely aware of that as well. And so again, we'd be working quite closely with whoever that cohort is to identify what needs there are for those for that specific cohort, so that we can co-develop that as well.
Elder. Okay, well, Fam, thank you all so much for all of your questions. I know there are actually a ton that got posted on the Q&A that we haven't been able to get to, but we have made note of all of them. We will formulate a response and we will publish them to our website with the rest of the information. On our website, there is also contact details for the staff that you can talk to learn more about each of these programs, and the art form specialists as well. Like I said, there's more webinars if you want to try and take it all in again. The Q&A sessions, which will be a little bit more interactive, less webinar-y. And otherwise, I think that's it. We may have covered it. Any last comments from the whare?
I'd probably just a couple of things from me. One, again, is just to acknowledge the incredible contribution of everybody and all of you in actually helping us shape this work. And it really has been a collaborative and collective effort. And we really hope that this lands well and resonates well with you. And I think the other piece I'd just note as well is that, look, something of such significant change, and not just in terms of the funds we're offering, but actually the thinking behind it, means that, you know, those are big changes to take on board. And so, you know, we know that we're all going to be having to take some time to absorb the changes and to get used to them and challenge some of our own thinking and, you know, the way we have worked in the past and the way we need to work now. But that will happen over time. And also we understand that given the nature of these changes, we will need to keep tweaking a little bit as well, that we're probably not going to land it 100% perfect right from the get-go of everything. So we will be continuing to listen and seek some feedback on this as we go through, and as required, we will be making some adjustments just to make sure we get the intended outcome of these changes. Kia ora.
Beautiful. Paul, Kiriama, have you got any closing comments?
Yeah, I guess also acknowledging that this is a lot of information at midday on a Wednesday, and acknowledging that a lot of you will also be in the middle of your lunch break. So we thank you so much for joining us in this session. But as has been mentioned, we also have other information sessions throughout this week, and then dedicated Q&A sessions next week, where we'll be able to dive into some of the questions that have been posed here. Or if after this session, you take a walk outside, touch the grass, or you know, get some fresh air, and then think, I should have asked that, please feel free to get in touch with us as well. Our contact details will be on the website too. And yeah, just acknowledging that this is a lot of information. So please be kind to yourselves as well as you're taking this all in. But we're here to help, and we're here to help answer those questions for you as well.
Tēnā
Tēnā rā tātou, kei te hunga reo Māori e mihi ana kia koutou. I runga i te ahuatanga o tēnei wai pari ana ngā tai o mihi kia koutou, koutou i whai wāhi mai ki tēnei kaupapa nei te ana mata o te whakapakaritanga o te whakawhanaketanga o ngā toi, me te tū hono kei wainga, me ngā momo hononga kei wainga nui a tātou, kia anga whakamua tātou. Nō reire, e mihi atu ana kia koutou, e mihi ana kia tātou, tēnā tātou.
Well, then it gives me great pleasure to start the wind up for this webinar, I want to just take a moment to say thank you to Gretchen and Kiriama and Paul and the other gorgeous CNZ squirrels that are behind the scenes. Thank you for making time to be with us and to share this information. It's an exciting start to a new adventure. And with that, Kiriama, kia koe.
Tēnā tātou. Kei onei tātou. E koe ima e korama, arangi atu ngā kino, ngā he, ngā whakaro kino, ngā itua. O te rangi o te whenua, o te takiwa o ngā wai, kia kau e whai wahi mai kia mātou e noho ake nei, tēnā ki tōna kāinga, tēnā ki tōna kāinga. Mana ki tia mātou, tia ki nā mātou. Tāwharau tia mātou ki te tāwharautanga o te ora. Kakahuria mātou ki te kakahu mana eriki mana atua. Whakawhiwhia kia mātou ngā huakatō tēnei hui ngā tātou rāinga hou. Tuturu ai te whakamaua kia tīna. Hui e, tai ki.
Bye. Yeah.
Tēnā tātou.
Yummy. Take care, everyone.